Welcome to My Bookshelf Slays, a podcast where writers and readers discuss why a book kills. I'm your host, Melissa Westemeyer, reader of almost everything and writer of quite a lot. Today's guest is Amy Poeppel, author of Far and Away. Welcome to the show, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Amy, I finished reading this book, and it was just such a satisfying read. It was such a just for listeners, the plot is about two women who do a home swap because of trouble at home, and their lives are just completely turned around by the experiences. There's a lot of interesting subplots. It was just one of those like I got immersed in it and didn't want to put it down kind of books. There's a little bit of everything, some little bit of action, humor, a bit of romance. You kind of covered the range. So I want to ask first, what inspired you to write this book?
So, this is the first book where the actual germ of the idea did not come from me. This was the first time I knew I wanted to write a book about Germany because I've spent so much time there in my life. And I was trying to think of an interesting storyline of a woman an American woman in Germany. But it was a cousin on my husband's side of the family who said, but what if it was a swap? She was like, I think you should do a house swap. And I thought, oh, okay, so two women, that'll be more interesting. And of course, because I spend a lot of my time in New York City, I thought, oh, New York and Berlin. But then as I discussed it with this cousin who loves, she loves the holiday, she loves the whole notion of a house swap. She was like, I think you need to come up with something that is a bigger contrast.
Ooh.
So I was born and raised in Dallas, Texas. And that was when I just thought this would give me a chance because those are two places that I really want to write books about. So I thought this is so perfect because this will give me a chance to talk about two places that are dear to my heart, two places that I feel really connected to. Um, and yet it will be in the same book. The book was a little more of a challenge than I anticipated when I first started writing it. We can talk about that later, but two locations is more than one. So it was a lot to take on.
I love that you said it in Dallas because I don't believe I've ever read a book set there before. And I thought that both settings just were so vibrantly described and made me want to go visit both.
Yeah, I mean, Dallas is just such a sophisticated, amazing city. And I still go there all the time. I still have family in Dallas. And I just love it. And it's so funny because people are like, oh, you're so lucky you live in New York City. The food is so great. I'm like, when I want really good food, I go to Dallas. Like the restaurants are just amazing there. The people are so nice. So it was really fun for me because I did spend the first 17 years of my life there. And it was just a really nice opportunity for me to sort of explore some of the things that I love the most about the place, and things that maybe people aren't aware of. It was just a good chance to do that.
You really captured the cultural differences of these two places so brilliantly. I recognized a lot of Americanisms as I was reading the book, but then, I assumed I'm not a German person, but I assumed a lot of their culture was equally represented, which was really fun to read.
Yeah, it was fun. I didn't want to rely too much on stereotypes. So I really tried to just be specific to the characters. Who is
Mhm.
this person? Who happens to be German or who
Yeah,
happens to be Texan? And try to get things conveyed that way rather than just sort of throwing it. Like, so for example, as I just said, the people in Texas are wonderful. They're very friendly. The people in Berlin tend to be the people in Germany, I should say, because Berlin of all the German cities is probably the most laid back of all of them. But I do think that Germans, especially older generations of Germans, tend to be more formal
hmm,
rather than just say that or have that be true of all the people because it's ridiculous. There are unfriendly Texans and there are incredibly laid back, friendly Germans. So it's so silly. I just decided that my characters would speak to those things. So I wanted the husband, Otto, for example, to be very like a lot of the people that I know in Germany who, happens to be very formal and then sort of see what would happen to him as he ends up in a place like Texas. And for someone like Greta, who's sort of got an American background as well. I mean, people are complicated.
yeah.
People have really interesting backgrounds. And I just wanted to bring as much of that out as I could in the book and have the culture of the places come through by the surprises that people encounter as they go to their new place and what they bring with them as they go to the new place. So that was both fun and a challenge.
There were no stereotypical characters in here. Like they were all so well developed. It was fun to read like about each individual character, honestly. So which of the characters um, was the hardest for you to develop? Because there were so many.
I mean, so my character Mason was probably the hardest because I put Mason off the page.
Yeah,
It was a choice I made. It was very deliberate. I wanted Mason in the book, and I did not want Mason in the book. I wanted Lucy on her own. That's his wife. So there's Lucy and Mason, and then there's
yeah,
Greta and Otto. And I wanted Lucy to have to tackle her problems on her own. So, how do you get rid of a person
right.
and yet still have a person, you know? And I thought he could die. And I was like, no, I just don't do that. Like I don't do sad.
Yeah.
They could be divorced. And I just thought, no, that's not what I'm going for here either. I just want him gone. And I was like, how can I make him just go in a way where even communication is going to be difficult? Because we all have our cell phones with us
Yes.
24 hours a day. There's no such thing as being sort of off the grid. So I started thinking, how could I get him off the grid? And I started doing all this research and I landed on this amazing documentary that I watched about Mars simulations. And for my purposes, that was perfect because I wanted Mason to be a serious person and an actual scientist. I wanted him to be, to have a real job and to be good at what he does. But I loved the notion that it's also theater. You're pretending to be on Mars. And there was something about that that just amused me to no end in terms of, and these are very real places in
Right.
Utah, I think, and New
Yeah.
Mexico, and all these different places. So I just thought, let's put Mason on Mars
On Mars.
and let's
I
have there some misunderstandings about that.
That was such a great like subplot in the story. And I was just like, wow, what a brilliant touch to kind of remove him from the story without making this other, his wife, this divorcee or a widow, which would have been it would have changed the whole family dynamic so radically. So
Yes.
you're right.
It would have
Um,
changed everything. And I also, but it did, to answer your question, it did take me a long time to know who Mason was. Like, why would you want to spend several months away from your family? And would that be a sacrifice or would that be something that you're happy about? And how would he react to his culture shock of being on Mars, in air quotes? What would that be like for him? And it took me a long time. The letters from Mason, I rewrote, and I mean, I rewrote
oh,
everything in this
okay.
book, but that was one of the things that was really a challenge because I didn't get to see him interact with his children in my brain.
Hmm.
I didn't get to see him interact with his wife, what his relationship was like to his in-laws. How could he miss his son's graduation? Like all of these things really troubled me. And I had to really scaffold that in so that
Yeah.
it felt right to me and then figure out who on earth is Mason. So in many ways, he was kind of the biggest challenge just because of where I put him.
And it's funny because that idea of putting him on Mars just really, I don't know if you did this intentionally or not, but it really aligned with the whole fish out of water trope, which kind of runs through the whole story. Like people who aren't in their natural habitat and
Yes.
what
Yeah.
does that do to their lives and what does that do to them? And I like how that was just one more way of exploring it.
And men and women interacting and when you're outnumbered by the opposite
Yeah.
sex and how that feels and all of that, it really did kind of come together in my head in a way that made me happy to keep writing the book because I thought that's interesting. He's adjusting too.
Yeah.
And on some level, people could be like, why did he just take off and leave his family? And on the other hand, you could be like, what a sacrifice he made for gaining knowledge, for the human race. So, I mean, there were just so many different ways of looking at it that really kind of gave me a kick.
So can I ask, which of your characters in real life you think would be awful to know?
I mean, I think Otto, especially at the beginning of the book, he really is very stern and he's quite humorless. And I think he would be tricky, probably. I think Bob, who's just a tiny little side character and wanted
Uh-huh.
he is. Um,
I
I mean,
like how he gets his.
he gets his. Just, I mean, I wasn't
That was
even.
it was a very Jane Austen kind of ending where all the little loose ends just sort of got very, it was ended in a very satisfying way. So for readers who like a Jane Austen kind of ending, you deliver.
I love hearing that because I love Jane Austen. And so to think that some of that might come through is just a joy for me to hear. Yes, I love tying things up, and I love tying things up in a way that isn't maybe quite what you expected, but
Hmm.
it feels right. It feels like the thing that should have happened. And I think that's why it takes me so many drafts to write a book, because it takes me such a long time to figure out not just what do I want to have happen, but what should happen, what needs to happen here, given these people. Because
Yes.
in my head, by the time, especially by the time I'm several drafts in, they live in my head like real people. They kind of have to. You
Hmm.
know, you kind of have to feel like if one of them walked into the room, you would recognize them. Uh,
Yeah.
it's sort of the only way to do it. The only way I know how to do it.
So was there a scene that didn't make it into the book?
Oh, sure. Oh, gosh, yes. Okay, so just for example, right off the bat, um, when I started writing this book and I was like, okay, house swap. And I was like, well, I gotta kind of set up the story, right? You've got to sort of set up why are they doing a house swap? What are they running from? What are they running to? How are they going to feel about going back home again? So as I started thinking about all that, and I started writing and I started writing, and I got sort of way into a draft of the book, and I finally got them on the airplane, and it was like page 250. And I was like, okay, that's not going to work. I got to get them out of town. Like, I got to get on with it. So, for example, the story with the boy, there's a teenage boy, Jack, who is Lucy's son, and he gets into severe, like seriously hot water at the very outset of the book. And you don't know quite what he did, and you don't know
Mhm.
quite how bad it was, and you don't know how much misunderstanding there's a lot of
Yeah.
misunderstandings in this for language reasons, for cultural reasons, all kinds of things. So with Jack, um, in my early drafts, you knew more at the
Mm.
outset, and felt um, it felt contrived to me, like a contrived reason to get them out of town, as opposed to something really, really real. And here's the funny thing: it felt contrived to me, even though there was so much more of it. So I cut the whole scene at the beginning of the book. Lucy goes into the principal's office, and that's it. The door closes. You don't really know what happened in the principal's office, but those scenes were written. I mean, I had the
Okay.
whole scene of Lucy arguing and Jack trying to make his case and failing at being able to express himself in the way that he's trying to. And I described the principal's office, and I described the principal in great detail, like you knew everything about him. Cut, 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 cut. Like
Yeah.
at some point, as I kept drafting, I just realized, like that does not need to be there. Um, but that happens to me with every book. I
Mm.
mean, the worst for me was my last book, The Sweet Spot, where I wrote the entire book. I finished it, 420 pages or whatever it was, and it wasn't working. I could feel that it wasn't working. And I realized I had told the story from the wrong person's perspective. It was not her story to tell. And I kept having her like wander, like the story was here, like
Mhm.
this was sort of centered,
Yeah.
and leaving. And then and I ended up sort of with two books. Like there was this one story and then her story. And I realized I've either got to write her story
Yeah.
or I got to start the entire book over again. And I started the entire book over again. I literally opened a blank document and started over. So in that case, there were 420 pages worth of scenes that didn't make it into the book. The character stayed. But she's a side character in The Sweet Spot. But that's just like
Yeah.
that's what this life is about, is you
If
have to
if you
serve.
want it to be the best version of the story possible,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So what scene did you write first?
Oh gosh. I think the first scene is the first scene that I wrote. I think
Oh,
Lucy
yeah.
finding out that something's wrong. I mean, it
Yeah.
went so
In the
many
meeting. She's in the
iterations.
meeting in that first scene, just for readers.
Yes.
We're
And
not
it went
giving anything away. She's at a work meeting and she gets interrupted with this phone call.
Yeah. And that was completely like, in fact, in an early version, she was like at a building site,
Mm.
like walking through a building
Okay.
people when it happened. But I changed her job many, many times. Because you want the job that's the right job for the character, but you also want a job that's going to sort of serve the story in some way that's interesting. Um, so that scene, though, I'm trying to think if that's correct, but my recollection is that that scene of Lucy getting that call that mothers hate
Hmm.
to get, where you find out that your kid is in some kind of situation
Yes.
and you don't have all the pieces of information, you got a feeling that it's bad.
Yeah.
It's really bad.
Yeah.
Um, and I wanted that feeling. I wanted people who read it to recognize that feeling of someone close to you, someone you love, has gotten themselves into some kind of mess, and there's going to be consequences. So that is actually, it's so funny. I hadn't even thought of that, but that is the first scene that I wrote.
Well, it's a great opener. I mean, it was a solid start from like page one. I was hooked. I was all in. I was going
Oh,
hard. So it was a very, I don't want to say it was an easy read, like it was below my intelligence, but it was an easy read because it was captivating, right?
oh, nice.
So can I ask, what if there's a character that you could do a spin-off or a sequel for, which character would you like recreate in their own storyline? Because there are a lot of good ones here.
I think Sylvie. I just love
Oh, no
Sylvie.
kidding.
I want to know more about her next chapter. I mean, Sylvie is
Yeah,
wonderful,
yeah.
very Southern, polite, lovely
Yes.
divorcee who is new to the neighborhood.
Hmm.
And she's just going to throw herself her own housewarming party. Like, that's the
Yeah.
kind of person she is. She's got to start over. She's an empty nester and divorced, and new neighborhood, new start. And she has sort of an initial disappointment because she comes over to invite Lucy to her housewarming party, and then when she comes back with an actual invitation, because she hasn't quite moved in yet, um, Lucy's not even in town anymore, and
Right.
so she has to sort of befriend Greta. And then and just seeing what I love to do when I'm writing is have a character and have Lucy see this woman, encounter her. What is Lucy's reaction to this woman? And then have Greta open the door to the same door to the same
Yeah.
character.
The
And
same
what
character.
impression? And then, of course, speaking of being outnumbered by the opposite sex, Otto's the one who ends up going to the party, and it's a women's party, and they make an exception for him, and he gets
Right.
to go. And it's just so fun to think of Otto in a situation like that, at a party like that. It's the kind of thing where the journey has really changed him,
Yes.
because I don't know that he even would have accepted in if he was
In
back
his
home.
own place. Yeah. His character is such a great example of how just a new backdrop can change your story. And
That's my
he,
feeling. Do you feel that way? Like, do you feel that travel really alters you in some way?
definitely.
I do too. Like, I feel like there are trips that I've taken where I'm just seeing things for the first time, and I just, it enriches me. It
Yes.
makes me kind of strong because you have to navigate certain things that you're not accustomed to. I mean, in Germany, for me, it was the grocery store. Like,
Oh,
when I moved to Germany at one point, and like,
yes.
you have you have to bag your own groceries in
Right.
Germany. There is no help whatsoever, and you are under enormous pressure to do it efficiently because there's a
Yes.
person right behind you in line, and they are making faces at you, and you got
Yes.
to get it done. And just little things like that, that now, like, every time I'm at a grocery store and someone's bagging my groceries, I'm like, wow, this is
Hmm.
it's just like, they're just little things like that. And I really wanted Otto to be another example of somebody who, where the trip truly changes him, his makeup,
Yes.
his reactions to things, his outlook on life. I mean, that I won't, no spoilers of any kind, but I have this moment at the end of the book where Greta looks up and sees him in the window looking out, and it's just, he's got this new perspective. This is
Yes.
Otto now, and
Yeah.
he's different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found his character just really interesting, and I loved how enthusiastic he became. He went
Yes.
from being a real woe is me kind of
Yes.
depressed victim
Yep.
character to so fearless and happy, and it was really a satisfying character arc.
I mean, I think for some people, like sunshine can really change you.
Oh
You know,
yeah, that is
he is
true.
so tired of the rain in Germany and he's so
Mhm.
just downtrodden and no one's nice to him. And you're right.
Yeah,
He's so woe is me. He feels very sorry for himself.
yes.
And I think Dallas and the kind of can-do attitude, sorry if my cat is interrupting our
No,
podcast.
it's all good.
Um, but I think it really gives him a whole new perspective and a whole new outlook on life. And then the interesting thing is when travel hits two people differently,
Yeah,
what does that do to
yeah,
your relationship? So that
right.
was something that I wanted to think about.
I wanted to ask you too about your teenagers because there are some scenes with just exclusively teenagers, no adults in the room.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how you were informed to capture their voice, to capture their attitudes?
Yes. So I, first of all, raised three teenage boys. They're all full grown now. Oops,
Okay.
sorry. I'm having an actual cat and dog fight in the apartment now. So
Oh, fun. That's
I am
fun.
living in a cartoon world here. It was like the fur was just flying. So sorry. Um, now I forgot what I was saying. This is the
Oh,
problem with
about
pets.
your three teenage boys being an
And then
influence.
I've always liked that age. So one of my earlier jobs was that I taught high school English and I taught juniors and seniors because I like that almost fully cooked, but not quite stage of life. It is messy. It is just as messy as it can get. But I just think, one second, we're going to get a little visitor. So sorry. I just think that that age is just fascinating to me. And finally, so I had my kids to sort of base things on. I have my students, all the high school students that I taught to base things on. I worked in admissions where I worked with kids trying to get into school. But I did what I always do, which is I consulted an expert and I made young people read those paragraphs and tell me if they read right. And also just for Jack's reactions to things,
Yeah.
like if with everything that happens to Jack, like how would you feel if this happened to
Mhm.
you? And what would you do if this happened to you? So get the experts, make sure that your vocabulary is right. My niece changed all kinds of words that I use. She's like, nobody says that anymore. I thought I was so
Ah,
cutting edge. And she was like, I used the word cray. And she was like, oh my God, Amy, like, no, just no. That's so, what did she say to me? That's so 2018 or something. I don't remember what year was,
you're
but I
like,
was
that wasn't even 10 years ago, kid.
I
But
know, I
it's
know.
ancient.
So she changed a lot of my dialogue, like the scene where Emmy is on the street taking her jog.
I was just thinking of that scene. Yes.
Yeah, and that scene I got her to read it and she helped me with a little bit. And even the music choices in the
Yes.
book got some help with that too. So
Those
but
read
I love
really tight.
the age. And I
I have,
loved seeing how Emmy and Jack's like Jack is sort of trying to run from scandal, but it follows him all
mhm.
the way there. And Emmy realizes that she's been too quick to judge about things and that she shouldn't judge if she doesn't have the whole story. And so that was a very fun and complicated but fun piece for me to kind of work out what are these two people to each other
Yeah.
in each other's houses with no knowledge of the other one. What would that how would that work itself out?
hmm
Yeah.
And yeah, and how do their stories converge? Because they shouldn't. Yeah, I was really surprised when they did. So that was like there were a lot of good surprises in this story, like a lot of twists and turns that again did not feel contrived because it was such a character rich focus in the story. Like yes, there's the inciting incident is, oh, we're going to swap houses in different countries, whatever. But the way that each character had their own motivations and their own internal dialogue and everything just made it resonate. And never once did I feel like, cute. You put that in there just to whatever. Like it was
Right. Yeah.
also, it just all came together
Well,
beautifully.
thank you. That is so nice. Thank you.
No, I am going to be telling people about this book. Like you are a new writer to me, by the way. I
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm excited to explore other books that you've got. I was like, oh wow, look, she's got all kinds of books out there. But this was, yeah, this is going to get all kinds of raves from me because it was
Oh, that's so
so fun to
nice.
read.
Thank
It was
you.
unique, it was original, ticked all my boxes.
Oh my gosh. That makes my day.
Oh, well,
I think
good.
all of my books, they're very different, but they all have that same. I would like when you get to the last page of each of them to feel that same way. That's what I was going for with every single book. So I don't set out to do that necessarily, but I think that we write how we are, kind of.
Mhm.
We
Yeah,
we
yeah,
sort of write our own sensibility, really. And
yeah.
so that sort of just ends up in every book that I write. Yeah.
I have the same problem as a writer. I'm too much of an optimist and happy ending, so it's hard to throw trouble in and make people tragic. It just
Yes.
isn't my jam at all. So,
I bring people back to life all the time. I mean, my third book, Musical Chairs, I had a death and we there was a funeral and we got all upset about it and I was so sad and I didn't want to keep going and I was just like my editor said, "Well, what if you brought him back to life?" And I was like, "Oh, I'd be so much happier. I'd want to finish the book." So I brought him back to life.
and you
Um,
can do that because you're the
yes,
king, queen of this
you get
world
to,
that you
yes.
created,
Yep, it's which is the best thing about it, right? I mean, that's
for
that really is
sure.
the best part is that we get to make these decisions and realize when we've made the wrong ones and
Yeah,
course correct when we have, which can be pretty exhausting sometimes, but also fun. Yeah.
yeah. So, one last question. What's on your bookshelf right now? And is it a book that you're recommending other people read?
Definitely. So I just read Annie Hartnett's The Road to The Road to hold on, I'm gonna get it for you. This is it's one of my favorite books that I just finished. The The Road to Tender Hearts. It was the word tender that I could not
Oh,
come up. The Road to Tender Hearts, Annie Hartnett. This is the craziest road trip book you will ever read in your entire
all
life.
right.
The most amazing bunch of characters on the most ridiculous um, quest. Just pure wacky. And I loved the characters, even with their flaws. They are so flawed, and I loved them. And it's very funny and very touching. And really unexpected. And I think it's a great summer read. I also read The Correspondent by Virginia Evans, which, if you like an epistolary novel, which I do, I love reading people's
Yes,
letters.
yes.
I really loved this book. There's a main character. You find out in the most beautiful way and skilled way about everything in her life, everything from her past, her future. You learn so much about her, and I cried and I laughed, and it's just wonderful. So those are two that I
Oh,
recent reads that I really enjoyed.
gonna have to add those to my shelf, sounds like. I appreciate the recommendations.
Yeah. Can I throw in one more?
Yes, you can. There's no limit.
Red Island House by Andrea Lee. That's another one that if you've got wanderlust and you like, if you read Far and Away and you like that feeling of being sort of placed in a new environment, The Red House is such an interesting book about a main character who's American. She grew up in California, ends up moving to Milan. So she's meets this Italian man and marries him, but he has built a home in Madagascar. On Madagascar, I guess we say on Madagascar.
Okay.
Um, and it is fascinating. It's deep. It will move you. It's really, really a wonderful read, and you will get really immersed in place if you like that, like to get immersed in a place. It's a wonderful read, and it taught me some history, and it was just fabulous. Loved it.
Oh, well, see, now I'm gonna have even a higher stack in my bookshelf. That's great. Amy, it was such a pleasure to talk to you and meet you
Total pleasure.
today. Thank you for this book, readers far and away. I don't think there's a reader who wouldn't like this book unless you like really dark, horrible, bad things to happen. Otherwise, this book is for you, and it's going to leave a really good taste in your mouth when you finish. So, Far and Away by Amy Poeppel. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.